Josh, I know we always theme these shows around kind of a message or a quote. And when we asked you, you gave us your mission. And I love that because you are very tied to your mission, I imagine. And knowing your journey and knowing your life, I know the commitment that you give. So for you to have an own personal mission statement, it means a lot, and it would mean a lot to anybody else that wanted to dig in and do that for themselves. But Josh says that my mission is to help people encounter Christ in a new and creative way. And Josh, I know I asked you, I wanted to know a little bit about maybe where that came from and what it means to you, that statement.
Yeah, for sure. So, for me, it was one of those situations where, honestly, I was praying and asking the Lord, because oftentimes we find ourselves like, all right, what, what's your will for my life? You know what I mean? And we have these splits in the road ahead of us, whether it's a career path or something. You're trying to make this decision, right? It's like, all right, Lord, where do you want me to go? And he just dropped it in me, like the idea of whatever you do it for the glory of God. Right. And that's literally scripture as well. I think it's Colossians, maybe 3:17. But then with that, he just dropped this little nugget in my spirit that was basically just, I want you to help people encounter Christ in a creative way. And I was like, all right, what does that mean? Right. And so just the whole idea is like, we're so used to hearing so many different stories and journeys through organized church, right? Which is a beautiful thing. And I believe in it. I support it, all the things. But I also think there's other avenues where we can grow, disciple, and reach folks right where they're at, right? And so everything I do channels right back to that, right? It's through conversations, through music, through sales, through leadership, podcasts, whatever it is, whether I'm sitting in a home with a client, whether I'm on the road on the phone with an agent, whether I'm on stage leading people in worship, or whether I'm on a podcast right here, I can help folks encounter Christ in a new and creative way, right? And so my mission always goes back to that. Like, how can I help people encounter him? How can I help people encounter him? Through me, through my actions, through my words, everything I'm saying and doing. Because as a follower of Jesus, right, everything we say and do does portray Jesus, whether it's a good portrait we're painting or a bad one, right? And so everything we say and do points back to him. And so for me, it's just a check in my spirit, a reminder, hey, know who you are, where you come from, and who you represent. So
I love that. I love that because think about, when you think about, as you spoke earlier, typically, organized church and yes, we support that as well. But hey, what are some other creative ways that I can share, right? I can share about your testimony or your love or, examples of who Christ is. So I love that. And how many families you get to meet each and every week and how often you get to do that, because that also inspires the spirit as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Everything we do, there's an avenue in which we can love on folks. And if there's one thing that I took away from my accident, which we'll get into later, is every encounter that I have with folks, if I can make them feel loved, because scripture again says they will know us by our love for one another, right? Then I'm doing my job well. If I can make people feel loved, not just by what I'm saying, but what I'm doing as well. So
I love that. Well, Josh, you have a very unique story and really one that should be shared in, can you unpack that? Because that's something that really shifted your lens possibly on life and your outlook on life. So, can you share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, for sure. So in the simplest, I'm not going to go through all of it just because we might be here forever if I do. But
We got time.
the stripped down version would be this. So I grew up in a Christian home, right? My dad, follower of Jesus, he was a worship pastor in a church for about 13 years. Grew up under a Christian home, like I said, but my dad had these underlying anger issues, right? that then I swore I would never have, right? But then ended up developing later on in life because all the people that we swear we're never going to be was somehow we end up turning into those people. I'm never going to say that. But my dad always said, guess what? Then it flies out of my mouth when I have a kid. Like, what I saying?
People do that sometimes.
Yeah. So I came to know Jesus at a young age because of that, right? Growing up in the Christian home, being raised in the church. But it wasn't until I was in high school that I really figured out what it actually meant to follow Jesus, right? To actually choose him daily, to die to self, that whole idea. And so with that being said, once I finally figured out what it meant to follow, like every good leader has to learn to follow first, right? But once I finally figured out how to follow, like that's when things changed, right? That's when things started to change in my spiritual walk and my journey. But I thought I was, in a place of like, man, I'm rock solid in my faith, all these things. I got out of high school, was dating my high school sweetheart, right? Ended up getting married. I had just turned 20, like 6 days before we got married. And so we got married pretty young. A few years later, I think it was like maybe 2 years later, we decided, hey, let's start trying to have kids, right? Well, my wife, she had some cysts on her ovaries, rupture, and they told us we'd never be able to have kids, right? Which was devastating to my wife, obviously. And for me as a husband, obviously devastating too, but I didn't know how to comfort her through that, right? Fast forward a few years later, right? Guess what? Now we're pregnant with our first child, and which is crazy. And so, we're having our first kid. I'm in the middle of a job transition. Just financially, I needed to make a different move, and things, because we're having a child, right? And that's expensive. And I knew the hospital bills were coming. I knew all the things. And so I'm in the middle of a job transition. And so I transitioned to selling motorcycles, side-by-sides, four-wheelers, that kind of thing. Day 2 on the job, I'm headed to work. It's a beautiful morning, right? And I had about a 55 minute drive to work. My father-in-law texted me the night before. He's like, hey, I know, you just sold your bikes because of having a kid, right? It's beautiful weather, save you some money on fuel, stop by my house. It's on the way anyway. Hop on one of my bikes. And so, of course, I'm going to take advantage of that, right? So I swing into his house, hop on a bike, and take off. Just like I said, it was a beautiful, smooth, crisp morning, just like everything you dream of as a motorcyclist, right? And so on my way to work, pull into a gas station, get me some breakfast, and as I'm pulling out, traffic's kind of backed up and things. They're doing some road work on an on-ramp on a interstate up near me. And as I pulled out, I was about 1,000 yards from my workplace, not that far. And a gentleman pulled out in front of me. They estimated my speed about 35 miles an hour. He pulled out in front of me, just trying to beat traffic, not paying attention, and hit me on my right side. And now, obviously, my body suffered a lot of traumatic injuries, right, as a motorcycle accident can be. And so some of that was it actually cut my foot off on impact, which is graphic, maybe too graphic for the podcast. I don't know.
Well,
it shattered my pelvis, broke my hip, compression fracture in my lower back. Somehow, really no upper body injuries except for the lower back injury. Some cuts and bruises all over, that kind of thing. But it threw me across three lanes. Yeah. The turning lane and the 2 slow and fast lanes, threw me across all those into a ditch, where I laid for about 5 minutes or so. Thankfully, there were some folks around, right, that saw it happen. Had it happened 3 seconds earlier, because there's dash cam footage of it floating out too, which is crazy. There's a gentleman behind me that had a dash cam. I'll send that to you guys later. If you want to see it. Shoot. No, so there's some people that saw it happen and things, obviously calling 911, all the things. Had it happened 3 seconds earlier, there was traffic. Had it happened 3 seconds later, there was a semi, right? And so if it was going to happen, thankfully it happened when it did, right? Otherwise I would have been hit multiple times. So thank the Lord, like he was right there with me, even though it was a motorcycle accident. And some folks were like, how could you say he was with you? Well, this is how, right?
I'm here.
So yeah, I'm here. Exactly. So motorcycle accident happens. Obviously people on scene, calling 911, whatever. There was a gentleman that was mowing the yard that I rolled into, hopped off his mower, ran down and put a tourniquet on my leg, ripped off my belt and put a tourniquet on. Now, I believe it's the Lord there, right? Just having somebody that knows anything about anything to put a tourniquet on my leg, stop the bleeding, right? With that as well, there was an off-duty firefighter in the line of traffic. The ambulance was at the gas station I stopped at, quarter mile down the road. So they were able to get there way quicker than normal. The hospital was 7 minutes away. The dispatcher that received the phone call whenever 911 was called was my cousin, which is insane. So she received the phone call. She was able to get a hold of my wife like 20 minutes quicker than protocol, which again, so thankful. And so just if it was going to happen, there were so many little aspects to the thing that it was obvious the Lord was right there, right? They get me in the ambulance, deliver me, and this is what the paramedic told me. She said, I delivered you and your foot to the hospital. Crazy. So they take me to the hospital, couple blood transfusions, some x-rays, and then put me in a helicopter to fly me to St. Louis. Well, thankfully my cousin was the dispatcher because she was able to get a hold of my wife 20 minutes quicker. My wife was able to touch me and give me a kiss before I got on that helicopter. And what she didn't know, and we didn't know and understand, is this was June 16th, 2020, right? Right in the heart of COVID. So as they put me in the helicopter, my wife didn't know that was going to be the last time she was going to be able to see me for 29 days. And neither did I. Like, I was out of it anyway. They had me on the good stuff, and so they put me in the helicopter. I'm taken to St. Louis. How they had me in a medically induced coma for about 3 days, just keeping me under because of all the surgeries and things they were having to do. But I remember waking up. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't remember any of it, which I guess is trauma. It's crazy how trauma has a way of just blocking things out in your mind. It's wild. I remember waking up and a nurse standing over me and her saying, do you know where you're at? And I was like, no, what's going on? And she's like, well, you're here in Barnes Jewish Hospital, St. Louis. You were in a motorcycle accident where your lower extremity was dramatically amputated. She kind of touched my leg. And again, I'm on some really strong meds. And so I'm struggling to respond or comprehend everything that she's saying. And I remember as she left the room, just like, what is happening right now? Where's my wife? Where's my daughter? Like, I have a 1.5-month-old baby right now, which was part of the hardest thing, right? A 1.5-month-old baby, right? Being in the hospital for 29 days, not being able to see my child and my wife for that long. Like, when they're that little, they change so stinking much. As you guys know, you guys have kids, right? Yeah. Feels like on their daily, there's something new, something's changing, right? They're growing, they're learning, there's everything. And so that wrecked my heart, wrecked my world. But with that, the next, 26 days, was a long road of recovery, right? And so, ended up having to amputate a little bit more of my leg due to infection and things. Underwent 11 revisions on my right leg, where it had to amputate, which it is below my knee for those who don't know, which is a big deal. Having my natural knee made learning to walk so much easier. Post accident, I went 106 days without walking. So a lot of folks, like, 106 days doesn't seem like that long, like right now when you're planning a trip or even like work events are coming up, it's like 106 days. We don't have time to plan for this, is how it can feel. But whenever you're in the moment of like, I can't walk for 106 days, oh, I felt like an eternity.
Well, not to mention, just pause it, like thinking, you said 2020. I mean, you're not able to see anybody. You were on full lockdown.
Yes.
It's a hack.
Go ahead. we have technology, we have FaceTime, and phone calls and text messages and all the things, right? Otherwise, I would have been a mess emotionally, which I was, right?
Absolutely. Well, and to go through something so traumatic and to think about, not being able to see your wife or your daughter or, anyone in your family that could be, help support.
Yeah. And
Physically.
there was a moment when I was in the hospital, when I was laying in the bed and, male physical therapist had just left the room. He was trying to help me stand up. Right. And I didn't have a prosthesis yet. So I was just kind of scooting to the edge of the bed and trying to stand up on my one leg. Because as you know, muscles that aren't used deteriorate. And so even after laying in a hospital bed for not that terribly long, my muscles were getting weaker. And so they were trying to get me up. And physically, I would like to think that I'm physically fit and able-bodied enough to stand up. Right. Piece off of a bed. Even with the help of the male physical therapist, I could not, which is weird, right? And so they ended up having to raise the bed all the way up to get me up, and that got in my head, right? And so whenever the therapist left, I remember laying in my hospital bed for a moment and just being like, all right, Lord, I don't know what the heck life is going to look like anymore. I don't know what's bathing going to look like. What is the day-to-day? I don't know anything, Lord, but I know that you're bigger than this. And so I'm going to need you to do this because I'm emotionally spent. I'm physically spent. I don't have anyone to lean on as far as relationally right now. I don't have anybody physically present with me. Lord, all I got to you, and I need you to step in. And he did, right? And he gave me this strength, because I was like, all right, Lord, I can't do this alone. And we all say the things, we've all heard, oh, you're never alone. God's always with you, all those things. And like I said earlier, I thought, hey, I'm, pretty strong in my faith, but it was those moments of being tested where it's like, all right, who are you going to turn to? Yourself? Are you going to turn, actually recognize your inherent need for the one and only, and be like, all right, I can't do this, Lord, I need you. And thankfully, I released it to him, right?
Yeah. Man, I tell you what, thank you, number one, for just sharing your story, because I think that sets up the power that you're going to give everybody as to maybe how you continue to walk, not only walk, but you literally walk for you, but you win in this world. Right. And I think back to our journey at COVID, and it was like, it's always said people hate change, right? Just one thing natural that people don't like to do is change. One thing that COVID presented to everyone in the world was forced change. So you had no choice but to change. It wasn't that I wanted to. And now in the middle of that for you, your whole life has changed, right? So you can't recreate that for somebody. We talk about how to train agents and how to create the experiences for them to allow for them to grow faster and go faster than we did because we've been there. But your situation is not something you can recreate for someone, right? So I think that's why what you're going to teach us today is so powerful, because there's a few, I'm sure, but not many people that are listening to this show have done what you've done.
And if you like that clip, make sure to like and subscribe to more of our content.